All right, let's get started. We'll have some people, I'm sure, jump in as we get going. But we want to welcome you guys to MSL Capita's mental performance and mental health kind of clinic. We're going to be kind of jumping into a lot of different topics and going into breakout rooms and doing all the fun stuff that you guys are normally used to with some of our clinics. So quickly before we start, I'll have Justin kind of introduce us and MindSpark Learning, and then we'll kind of get right into it.
Yeah, so once again, thank you guys so much for joining us today. My name is Justin Goldman. I'm the Director of Athletic Partnerships here at MindSpark Learning and with the MSL Capita program. And we're also being joined by Davis Turner, who is the Senior Director for Strategic Programs at MindSpark Learning. And MSL Capita is a new program at MindSpark Learning focused on supporting coaches and sports organizations and helping them develop resilience through sport. So we're really focused on upskilling professionally and personally coaches and sport organizations and anyone involved in athletics. For this session today, we're really excited to begin our first of two parts of a series on mental performance and mental health for athletes. And I think right now we all know that athletes and anyone who plays sports is dealing with a lot of mental health and mental performance struggles during the COVID pandemic due to sports being on hold. So this is a really pertinent and important topic that we feel like needs to be discussed openly. And that's really what we're going to do today during this session. We're just going to have an open conversation, an open dialogue about the impact of mental health and mental performance on athletes during this time, and also give you a lot of great tools and resources and insight into how you can go out and support the mental health and performance of your athletes. If you can't hear us for whatever reason, you're not going to be hearing me speaking, obviously, but there are some ways that you can kind of troubleshoot, and we have that here listed for you. We just like to put this up because I know sometimes audio gets a little messed up with some of these sessions, so we'll just keep this up here for a second in case anyone's having an issue hearing us. And we also like to stress just having that conversation face-to-face as much as possible. I know it's not always comfortable, but we do ask in breakout rooms and any group discussion that we have that you just turn your camera on. You will be automatically muted, but we can also unmute you as well. So if you have any technical questions, feel free to reach out to Davis in the chat room, and he'll make sure you're taken care of.
And please feel free to use that chat room to ask questions. Like we said before, ask questions, give feedback, share your opinions, your kind of experiences. This is kind of a vulnerable topic for a lot of us. So please, we want to make that as, open as conversation as we possibly can. So I know some of these things can be a little, vague and kind of personal, but we want to make sure that we're breaking down those barriers, but also making sure you're as comfortable and feel as comfortable sharing your opinions and ideas as well. So,
yeah, like I said, we're just here to have an open conversation and to share our expertise and insight and allow you an opportunity to share with the other people that are attending the session and with us as well. And we're going to dive right into it. We know that athletes deal with a lot of mental stressors and a lot of demands. And just to kind of get a feel for some of the demands that athletes have to deal with, we're going to throw you into this activity where you are actually going to work on what's called a concentration grid. And a concentration grid is a really great exercise to help improve the mental focus and concentration of an athlete. And what you're going to do is you're going to follow the link that Davis shares in the chat room, and we're going to give you 8 minutes to finish this grid. And once you click on the website, all you have to do is push that start button, and right away you're going to see this grid like you see in the picture here, and you have to click through starting at 00 all the way up to 99 as quickly as possible. And the grid, all the numbers on the grid are scattered totally randomly. So you really have to focus and, dial in your concentration and try and get through those numbers as quickly as possible because it is timing you. So we're going to give you 8 minutes, and let's just see who can get through it the fastest and see what kind of time you can get.
Yeah, post your times when you come back.
All right. So as we kind of come back from this exercise, I'd love for you guys to kind of share your experience in the chat room. We saw some times getting posted, which is great. And for myself, I always feel like I get super frustrated when I string maybe 4 or 5 numbers in a row and then I'm pacing around trying to find that next one and I can't find it. And we really enjoy this exercise because it gives you a really good glimpse into the mind of an athlete, you know, just some of the demands that they face in terms of having to focus and concentrate, but there's so many external things impacting their ability to stay focused on that single task. And this is a great exercise that you can use with your athletes in whatever sport that you're involved in. And it really does help warm up the brain. So it's got that neural priming component to it. There's a lot of different things that this can do to kind of help improve the mental or the mindset of an athlete, but also challenge them on a daily or a weekly basis, because with this website, it will track your time and you can kind of go back and continue to try and beat your time. So just a really cool exercise that we wanted to share. So as we kind of move forward here, we wanted to share some of the main objectives we have for this 2-hour session. And really, I think it just kind of starts with helping everyone understand why mental health is so vital to an athlete's mental performance and why the two are so inherently linked. And then as we kind of have that discussion, we'll go into identifying some of the barriers that are affecting an athlete's mental health during this pandemic. Some of these are obvious and other ones maybe you haven't thought of before, and that's really where we're going to drive the discussion. Then we're going to, we're going to hear from some experts. We're going to share some great strategies, and we're just going to help you guys discover some different ways to gain insight on how to promote mental health, again, to your athletes or within your sports organization. And then we're going to try and really focus on sharing experiences, tools, and some resources with all of you, and you're going to share with us in return so that we can help build everyone's library of resources that are available to us that we can then pass on to our athletes as well. So those are kind of the 4 main objectives for this session today.
I do want to mention too, Justin, we're going to be able to send out a recording of this whole process as well, this recording of this session, as well as a large list of toolkit kind of links and resources and pages and things that you guys will be able to leverage. So please, like we said, we're an education nonprofit. Share it with your networks, share it with whoever you see fit, and spread the good word, because we want to make sure that everybody has access to this. We're not something that we want to be notified or known for. We just want everybody to be able to know that they have the accessibility, they have the opportunity to learn. And that's kind of the biggest push on our end. So please feel free to share out everything that we share with you today.
And thanks for sharing your times on the concentration grid. And again, that's a great resource for you guys to use. And we will have that available as a link in the online toolkit that we'll be providing as well. So now we'd just like to play this video as we kind of get rolling here.
I want to share my story so I can help.
Understand that it's okay to not be okay.
It's time to talk. It's time to change.
When I played football, that was my language. That's how I communicated. And when that was taken away from me, I just felt like I was nothing. I was no one.
You know, you got so much responsibility as an athlete to your team. You know, you got to play at a certain level, and your teammates counting on you. You got the pressure from the media.
You know, when you experience the highs, and obviously you're going to experience the lows, and it's coping with the lows that is the most difficult part.
When I got into my state, it hit me like a brick.
Was that because
I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want anyone to think differently of me.
When I was playing rugby, my feet were not planted deep, they were shallow. Anything was knocking me around, and I felt like it was a balancing act. I had to fight against this, fight against this, fight against this, and hold on and survive and win a game, and it was just, thank God for that, let's move on.
Yeah.
I suffer from depression. Depression is with me on a daily basis. It is time for sport to accept its responsibility with this issue.
There's records, there's numbers that I'm really close to, and of course I feel pressure, but I will play, I will fight, and I will keep going on.
And my thoughts of wanting to take my life, they don't define me, and they will never define me, and they'll never win.
Struggles are going to happen in life. You know, you're going to get punched in the mouth at some point, but understand that you can get back up and dust yourself off and and get back out there.
And everybody's going through something, and everybody, has things that you can't see, you can't touch, that, they're walking around with every day.
If your eyes hurt, you go to the opticians. If your head's hurt, you go and see someone about mental health. It'd be nice just to let it out rather than keeping it in. Because the more you keep it in, the more you explode.
I don't know why I opened up and talked about it, but I guess I was just sick and tired of just having it inside of me for 20 plus years, and I was ready to make a change.
I'm glad I got through it.
Okay, so
I want to share my story.
So a really great video that we wanted to share, because I think it shows just the variety of athletes at all different levels in all different sports that are dealing with all kinds of different emotional struggles. And a lot of that is due to the demands that they face as professional athletes, but this also trickles down all the way to the grassroots and youth level. And knowing that everyone's dealing with something, like Kevin Lowe said, is part of the reason why it's just so important to have a conversation about mental health and performance, and to continue to, try and promote that, that culture of openness and culture of sharing.
And I think, that's kind of the point of that video too, Justin, is the idea that when they're shown, through media and through sports and through, the publicity that they get, it's never, those vulnerable states. It's them performing, and it's them kind of built up to this, agenda, or this kind of this performance, right? And they're never really shown behind the scenes. You see maybe clips or glimpses of a practice here and there, but it's never, let's open up and talk about this. Let's open up and talk about yourself, your interpersonal, your inner workings, and so on. So it's really interesting. And this is kind of why we put this slide up here, is with this new generation, with everybody trying to share what they're doing all the time, and comparing and competing of their lifestyles, right? I mean, it's that Instagram, Facebook kind of mentality that we have to share the best versions of ourselves at all times. We're never, I think we're becoming more open to it, but at the same time, we're also sharing, only the highs. We're never really sharing those low moments. We're never really sharing our true selves or our body image, because, we're able to reproduce everything on, through Photoshop or whatever it is. We're kind of hiding and behind this mask. And so, when we say a picture is worth 1,000 words, is that the reality, right? Is this really showing who you are and what you feel inside? It doesn't show those deep feelings that may be rooted from years of trauma before, or anxiety or depression that you're facing. It's showing that single captured moment. And we have a society has kind of, we're able to manipulate that even more so now than we ever have before. So I think it's always neat to look at different perspectives and not really know what's going on with each and every individual athlete. And I think that's where we need to start learning how to break down those barriers too. And that's kind of the point of this conversation today. So you can go to the next slide. So when we talk about like mental health, right, we look at a lot of these different pieces, and we look at, how does it affect performance? And when we look at, the basic, we always see like, oh, you're depressed, or you're anxious, you just must be nervous, or you must be, just sad. But that's not it, right? We have this huge and large spectrum that athletes go back and forth on, even humans, right? We come to work, some days we're higher than others, we get something work accomplished, our serotonin flushes our body, and we're, ready and energized for moving on. But that doesn't always exist. We're never always riding that high, even in our performance, our, peak stages. We want to stay in that peak performance zone, 2, 3 hours, 4 hours at a time, but that's just not feasible. And I think that's where we have to struggle. When we struggle, we get more anxious throughout our performance. And when we continue to yell, or we continue to coach from the sidelines, expecting those types of things, that's when it becomes a more detriment to that mental piece too. And we really have to kind of think about all the different pressures that are being put on our athletes, not only from us ourselves as coaches, parents, mentors, teachers, consultants, whatever it may be. It is those outside perspectives that always have those influences too, that still change that spectrum or change that kind of lineage of emotion.
And especially since we understand everyone is dealing with something and everyone has experienced some type of trauma in their past that's going to affect them in different ways, especially during the COVID pandemic, it's extremely important that we understand that athletes need and deserve, personalized tools that are available to them at any given moment, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, to support their mental health and to allow them to have different ways to improve their overall happiness and mental well-being so that they continue that track of success. And this is just a great graphic we wanted to share that shows how mental health and mental performance is on a spectrum. I know for myself as an athlete, there are times when I can go through this whole spectrum in the course of a couple of hours. That's just the nature of competing. That's just the nature of wanting to be the best version of yourself. There will be situations that arise that are out of your control. That's going to cause you to struggle or feel like you have that sinking sensation. And then 2 seconds later, something can happen in a game and you're on the top of the world. And that can be a very emotionally draining experience for, again, any athlete at any level. And really looking at the human element of performance in sport is extremely important. And again, that's why we really want to reinforce the fact that everyone deals with situations differently. Everyone is going to have this propensity for struggling. And by having these conversations and talking about it, we all get better. We all gain perspective and we all kind of empathize with other human beings in a similar way. So this is a great little graphic courtesy of the Same Here mental health movement. And you'll learn a little bit more about that organization later on in this session. And really, when it comes to identifying a lot of the problems that we're dealing with in terms of mental health and performance in the sports world right now, we are sharing a lot of resources and recent studies in our toolkit that you will receive after this presentation, showing a lot of negative trends regarding mental health during COVID, whether it's due to burnout or the frustration of canceled seasons or just that lack of attachment and connection to teammates and friends. Coaches are struggling with their mental health right now because they do value that connection with their athletes and they really haven't had the opportunity to have that influence and that positive impact over the last 4 or 5 months. So again, this is something that everyone is struggling with in different ways. Everyone's trying to find the right way to cope and to, increase their mindfulness and mental well-being. So we're all in this together. And a lot of times it just comes down to the fact that, coaches and organizations may just not have the tools or the resources they need to provide that proper support. And again, that's why, we're so passionate about hosting this session and why all of us together can, help build that library of resources, help build that toolbox. We often talk about with athletes that the deeper their skill set is, the more dynamic they're going to be on the field or on the court. And the same goes true for, mental health and performance. The more tools and the more resources and the more experts and voices that you have kind of in your back pocket, the more it's going to help you, in relation to the situation that you're dealing with. And so by not having those resources and not having the, environment or the platform to open up and speak out, that results in the silent struggle. And that perpetuates a lot of the mental health stigmas that we see at all levels, from the grassroots all the way up to, the elite Olympians like Michael Phelps.
I think too, Justin, you made a good point with, some of these organizations, during this pandemic too, it's a lot of them are struggling financially too. So they know that they might not be able to necessarily financially afford, a mental health professional or a counselor or a psychologist on their staff. But so this is kind of geared towards, let's make sure that this is accessible so you understand it. And it's not just necessary for these people. There is definitely times where we need to make those referrals for sure, but we need to try to catch these things before it gets too late. And being on the front lines of these types of situations and knowing and being aware of some of the types of observable signs that we can do or ways to prevent it, that's where we really need to focus kind of some of our energy and attention. And I understand athletic departments and in the financial pieces with these sports organizations right now, it's very bleak. And so especially with, some schools returning, some not, and organizations or sports actually returning or not, it's very difficult. And we need to make sure that we as coaches are better prepared to have these conversations, because we know that maybe they don't have the financial capability of bringing in a psychologist or a counselor or, mental health professional onto your team or staff full time.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important too to understand that it is easy to see, sports and entertainment through rose-colored glasses. And by that, I just mean that, it's not always a great or an easy or a perfect experience for an athlete. There really is a catch-22 involved with competitive sports. Sports is meant to promote mental wellness and, overall physical health by going out and playing games with your friends. But at the same time, it can also lead to damaging mental disorders because of the things we've been discussing in terms of the competitive nature, the over-competitiveness, that inner and external drive to want to be the best, the pressure you face from your parents, fans in your community, kids at school, the internal demands that we place on ourselves to be the best every single day. There is such a thing as this catch-22 where it can become overwhelming, and it can become much more difficult as time goes on, to cope with this and to manage all of those pressures perfectly. And so this is what we call the catch-22, because we are seeing this statistic right now really come to fruition where 80% of youth athletes are quitting after age 15 because of those demands. And again, if they don't have the tools or they don't have the self-awareness to understand how to manage some of these potential damaging disorders, that's where we see the burnout rate. That's where we see kids, shying away from opening up, shying away from, trying to get the answers and to get better and to continue to play the sport. So they just quit the sport altogether. And that's where we shared this graphic from a tremendous article on medium.com that kind of shows you just how some of these different pressures can affect an athlete's, mental state. Concussions is one that has really come to the forefront over the past 5 or 10 years in football and hockey and some of these other high contact sports. And again, it's just going to show you that you don't see a concussion on the outside. It's not like a physical injury. It's something that's really happening within the brain. And if an athlete doesn't know how to express themselves or share how they're feeling, it can become really, really difficult to, kind of diagnose that concussion and help that athlete get the right help. And that can have lingering and long-term effects that will affect their happiness in their everyday life.
And just kind of share some of my personal experience with concussions. I mean, I've had 7, right? And it's a very high number. And when I was in college, first week of training camp for hockey, got my last concussion, my 7th one. Coach told me to stop. I was, ready to have a scholarship, ready to be on the team, but first week of training camp, just done. That led to substance abuse. That led to depression. My whole first freshman year in college was kind of almost a blank wash. I wasn't myself. I had mood swings all the time. I, was on different pills and prescriptions that I just couldn't find a balance, right? And I didn't do well academically. I pushed my family away. I pushed my friends away. I was, sitting in dorms, skipping classes just because I didn't know how to cope. And, all these tools that were out there, I never knew about, right? I was never exposed to some of these things. And I think that's where a lot of these coaches could have a bigger deal. And I thank my coach at the time for essentially saving my life by having me stop playing. But at the same time, too, I didn't think about that at the time, right? I was resentful. I was mad. I was angry. I was just very combative with that choice. So, I left. I did my thing. And years later, I in retrospect, I really appreciate the choice that he made for me in that medical and health standpoint. So I think it's really trying to find that balance and how to make those conversations exist that, we know what the long-term effects are, and mental health needs to be dealt with just as much as a physical injury. And we'll kind of go into that in a little bit too.
I think that's great that Davis is able to share that with us, because I know it's not easy, but again, by him being willing to open up and explain a little bit about what he went through during his college years, again, it's a self-perpetuating cycle of openness. And that's just something that I can resonate with. I remember when I was in college, maybe I didn't deal with the number of concussions that Davis dealt with, but as a hockey player trying to make the team and be at your best, you deal with some of the same anxieties and pressures and frustrations. And that helps us bond together as friends and as cohorts and coworkers. And again, it also allows us to go out and want to share and help other coaches and sport organizations understand just how important it is to, be thinking about these things and to be building those resources and building those industry partnerships with others in the mental health field to, in order to help our athletes be better. And this really kind of drives home the point of a theme or a metaphor that I personally really like to use called lift the mask. And lift the mask is just a way to help athletes understand the importance of actually showing and sharing their true emotions. Whether you're a football player or a hockey goaltender like I am, we spend a lot of our daily lives behind a mask. That mask is meant to protect us physically from the harm of, other players and hockey pucks, but at the same time, it's also hiding our true emotions. And that's what helps kind of develop some of these, anxieties and some of these issues in terms of opening up and getting the right help. If we're spending a lot of time behind our mask and we don't have to show our true selves, and we're just expected to be these, perfect athletic specimens that never have any negative body language and are always even keeled and in control, then let's face it, that's not reality. That's not what we should be expecting from our young athletes. And maybe we see that in certain moments on the big stage with professional athletes, but we always have to remember that athletes are humans first, and they're not machines. They have emotions, they have feelings, they have struggles. And so we use this metaphor of lift the mask to kind of reinforce the fact that, you're going to be struggling at times. You're going to be going through a lot of different things, but by lifting that emotional mask and sharing it with others, not only are you helping yourselves, but you're helping your teammates, you're helping society, you're helping the culture of youth and professional sports become more open and accepting and shedding some of those stigmas. So that's just one metaphor that you can use, again, in your sports organization with your athletes to help kind of drive that discussion forward.
So we'll kind of share this.
Everyone wants around.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Justin.
You can't see. All go through it. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are, man. The best thing that I did was to come out and say, hey, look, I need some help.
Never be ashamed of wanting to be a better you, period.
No, I think this video, even though it's, a quick 30 seconds, and NBA Together has kind of a new initiative for pushing mental health. I think it's a great piece, because I know Kevin Love has a great piece on the Players Tribune, which we'll attach in the toolkit and resource kind of library later on. But it's really bringing to light, professional athletes struggle too. We have to understand that as role models and as these, elite athletes, we have to be able to break down those barriers at the grassroots level. And just because, they're already up here at the top tiers and they've overcome so many other obstacles, they still have obstacles that they face, and they're humans as well. And we always put these players and these athletes on a pedestal, but they struggle just as much as we do. And we have to understand, and I think, we're doing a better job as a society accepting mental health, but we're not addressing it in the ways that it needs to be addressed. And that's why there's so many initiatives and so many new organizations that are coming up that are trying to address it on a different level, on a grassroots level, but it's got a lot of work to do. And we have to start, from within our own organizations to really start making that happen. And I think the next slide really kind of helps explain that point. Is we always preach to our athletes that the game is 90% mental, but we spend such few times or such little time on actually addressing the mental performance or the mental health needs of these athletes. And so when we say it's mental, what are we doing to do that? How are we bettering our athletes, right? It's kind of this weird paradox that we put ourselves in, and we don't know how to do it. We say it and we've heard it. We keep initiating those conversations, and say, think about it. You know, you have to, you know, envision yourself to do this, but how are we training them? Maybe they don't know how to process that. Maybe they don't know how to think about this situation or visualize these types of scenarios going their way. And I think that's where we really need to start focusing, right? We really need to start focusing on that mental health and mental performance piece, because it is, you know, such a mental game. Video and, you know, off ice training or off field training and all that stuff, that's different from the mental game. And we really need to really understand the different aspects of what goes into a performance.
Right. And just looking for more balance. Like I said, we want to treat athletes as human beings first, and then developing the athlete second. I think if you take that approach, a holistic approach, it is going to help balance that out, and this paradox will start to fade. But with all the research that's out there and all the experiences that I've had and we've shared with each other at MSL Capita, this still holds true today. And yes, it is starting to get better in certain areas, but in other areas, maybe not so much. And all the way from the grassroots levels, like Davis said, to the very top, we want to start to, you know, eliminate the stigma around this paradox and help organizations balance out, you know, how much time they're actually integrating with how much mental skills are being integrated into the day-to-day schedule and training that's taking place with athletes at all levels. So getting into some of the actual COVID barriers that exist right now, we shared a pretty small list. This is just a few of the things that I think, you know, athletes are dealing with right now, and coaches as well, that are dealing with during this COVID pandemic.
I think when it comes to, you know, thinking about yourselves, and it's not only our athletes, but it's ourselves too, right? Like, I have a completely different sleep schedule. I don't want it, but that's how it is, right? I'm not waking up at, you know, 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning to get ready and get prepared for a work day when I have to go into the office, right? I can roll out of bed, not shower, and just jump into my basement office, but that's completely changing my mentality for the day. I'm not starting my day with, you know, the same routine. And so changing the routine a little bit, or changing your diet, really affects the way that you perform and affects the way that you've kind of built a successful thing. And maybe it wasn't successful before and you found a new routine that's more successful, but there are these instances in which have changed and have altered, you know, the different situation that we're in. And so we have to kind of take it for either a learning opportunity or figure out why we've changed it so much and so drastically to make that impact in our own lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it would be great too if you see anything on this list that might be missing, or that you've experienced, or that you've seen in your athletes. Feel free to share it in the chat room, because the barriers are deep and far-reaching, and I think it's something that we can all kind of associate with in some way, shape, or form. And like Davis said, he shared a little bit about, you know, his schedule being changed, and we're all dealing with that, working from home for 4 straight months without the ability to watch our sports and to go out and have, you know, those experiences with our friends and feel that connectivity is going to have a detriment, whether you feel it right away or not. Picking up bad habits is something that's definitely happening. My gym right down the street closed. I haven't been in the gym in 4 months. It's tough to deal with, because you know you should be doing your regular routine on a daily basis, and when you don't have it, you're dealing with frustration, anger. The self-awareness is there, knowing that I'm not the best version of myself is something that is tough to struggle with. So if there's anything else that you see that might be missing, that either you're experiencing or, you know, your athletes are dealing with, definitely feel free to share that in the chat room.
I think this next one kind of stems from that, right? Like, we have seen changes and we have noticed, you know, different patterns. And so if you are with athletes, or you notice them either on a Zoom call, or you're starting to reinitiate practices or training, keep an eye out for these things, right? Especially with sports somewhat trying to return and making that attempt and seeing how things go and kind of playing it by ear. I think it's great, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we're continuing to be safe. But you'll notice pretty quickly, right? Has there been a change in eating habits? Is there, you know, increased substance abuse? Do they look tired? Do they look fatigued pretty quickly? Are they irritable? There are these pretty obvious observable signs. There's definitely more that might be less obvious and more internal, but we just have to make make sure that, we're still making that effort of communicating and building those relationships, so then we can break down those barriers of what may be going on. And I think that's where we really focus on, let's make a change, right? And so that's where we need to have those conversations begin. So we're going to go quickly, kind of same thing as we're doing here with the chat. We're going to kind of get a quick kind of sense of where you're at with, some of these obstacles, and what are you seeing from your athletes right now? Even if you may not be, directly dealing with everybody, we're going to kind of see where you see some of these barriers, right? So click on the link that I just posted in the chat. There's going to be kind of an opportunity for you to type in your answer, and then we'll kind of be able to see everybody's responses and so on. So,
yep. Take just a couple of minutes to answer. If you already typed something in the chat room, if you wouldn't mind maybe just dropping that same answer into Mentimeter, that would be great. And then we'll go ahead and share the answers. Let's see. While you guys are typing them in. So as kind of answers start to pop up here, you'll see them. Okay, lost identity, feeling of loss, anxiety over missed seasons, unable to get recruited. I think that one I know for seniors in high school, even some seniors in college that are looking for that pro contract. The recruitment side of it is definitely an issue. Motivation to keep training and working hard every day. I definitely know a lot of athletes that are dealing with that. I like this answer. Worrying in general causing energy to be low. I think that's a great way to show that connection between mental health and mental performance. If you're dealing with a lot of worrying and you're struggling to cope, it's going to drain your energy, and that's going to affect how you perform physically. Your sleep patterns, your habits, that's a great one. Isolation, loneliness, feeling trapped, decreasing hopes. Nancy, I know you shared that in the chat room, parents' loss of jobs and all that goes with it. We know, and again, in the online toolkit that we'll be sharing, you'll see some research showing how, because parents are not having their normal income, they've had to pull kids out of sports altogether, which is definitely, a struggle and going to affect a kid's mental health.
Right. And I like some of the comments too with food scarcity and problems at home and not feeling safe, being at home. And I think that's a very big traumatic insecurity. And I think that can have a lot of effects on a child if they're forced to be home and they don't even feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Really good answers. All right. Thank you guys so much for sharing. And we'll provide the link as well to this. So if you want to see everyone's answers, you can keep that link open on your browser. We'll also provide the link for you in the online toolkit. So we'll have another one of these later on. And let's go back to our slide deck.
So as we kind of think about that too, we think about what those triggers are, right? And we think about, if we have those triggers or if we have those things that do cause stress, how are we really going to understand what that is? And I think as we move on to the next slide, Justin, we really think about how do we identify, not just to identify, but identifying these instances to understand. So it's not just what is your barrier, what is something that's holding you back, or what is something that's causing you stress? What are we doing to really change that and alter that so we can not only pivot, but also leverage that anxiety to almost a positive. And not always is it going to turn into a positive. I'm not going to say like, trauma is going to just be like that energizing piece, but how can we reframe it and rework it so we can cope and we can move on, or we can, at least kind of survive. And that's kind of a situation that we've all kind of experienced in this situation too, is we all have been gliding or sliding or just just doing anything we can to stay afloat at some points. And that's kind of where we really need to ask ourselves, what are we doing for our team? What are we doing for ourselves and beyond? And so we need to create that, anonymous needs assessment so people can feel like their voice is valued without having to give those personal and contextual clues. How are we building those relationships afterwards? Is there, a program that we're going to be able to support or build and get them in touch with either experts or, a different connection or a different mental health professional? What is it that we're doing as organizations and policies and procedures that make things accessible and equitable? Not everybody is going to have access, and how do we promote that? And how do we provide access to people that may not have it through their health insurance or may not have it through, different means? What can we do to help kind of, I guess, make it more equitable in a sense? And then what does that follow-up look like, right? How do we make sure that they're still continuing to get the care that they need, and not just that one-off and be like, are you okay today? Cool, high five, let's go on, let's move on, right? What does that follow-up care look like, and what does that follow-up plan look like? And we need to make sure, that we're still respecting the boundaries and the abilities of, ourselves, because even ourselves, Justin and I, we're not mental health professionals. We're just trying to create that competency and that kind of empowerment and confidence in you guys to take those conversations to a different level. And I think I have to stress that more, is because we are here to help you build relationships. And that's where those kind of conversations stem from, is building those relationships and building that trust and building, those types of frameworks in your system that will be more sustainable, that will be more empowering to your athletes to then believe in you because you care for them and you're showing that emotion, you're showing that vulnerability with them. And then being able to say, all right, well, I can't handle this, I know somebody that can, and being able to make sure that you're providing them with the support that they need, even if you can't provide it yourself. So we have a wonderful speaker that can't be with us today, Derek Vigon, who is a sports psychologist out of George Mason University. And we had the privilege of asking him a few questions, or sending him over a few questions. And he was, we were lucky enough that he recorded it for us. So we're going to watch the first part that kind of just teases a little bit of the answers. And then we have, a second part later on that we'll kind of address as well. But it really kind of focuses on very similar things that we're talking about currently.
Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Derek Vigon, a licensed clinical and sports psychologist. I'm here today to do this interview with MindSpark and MSL Capita for you all. The first question is, number one, give us a little background on why you became a sports psychologist. So I was an athlete my whole life. I studied psychology for my bachelor's, my master's, my doctoral degrees. It made the most sense to combine all of my passions, which are sports, psychology, and music. Growing up, I played high school volleyball in California, won a state championship out there. And as I was saying, my athletic identity it's central to my identity. So this was an integral part of my self-esteem and confidence. So it made sense to work in this area as well. As a sports psychologist on a Division I athletic department setting on a college campus, I love the pulse on college campuses. And college students keep you on your toes. And it's really unique because the work is about building relationships with young people and really getting to make an impact on a young person's life, which I think is priceless. The second question is, have you noticed your work interaction with athletes change over time? And if so, how so? So what I'm noticing is that more and more athletes from the grassroots level all the way up to the professional level are implementing mental training and performance as part of their routine. Just like athletes would go to the gym to do physical training. From my perspective, the whole healthy person is the best performer. And as athletes, athletes are humans, so they run into the same clinical concerns or issues that a regular person might run into as well, and these have been a constant for me. I would say that the performance work is also present, and this can be really fun. However, it's really important to make the distinction that the person is kind of balancing all areas of their life, this athletic identity, this academic identity, and then the personal, social life, family balance as the other part. The third question is, how has mental performance been redefined, and how has this affected your research? So I think mental performance pretty much means being flexible. It means being able to pull out a top performance when you need to, even if there are aspects of the performance that are imperfect, or there are other obstacles that are coming up that are not ideal. And my dissertation research, Psych Beats, really helps flood the athlete or performer with 5 components of self-talk and self-efficacy based on my research findings that's linked to optimal performance. So to me, mentally tough means being able to manage the moment and getting as close to what we know as flow as possible. When your body might be hurting, when the opponent might be playing well, or when there are a number of environmental factors that might be getting in the way that we didn't anticipate, right? So I think it's a kind of this idea of really not overthinking it, just doing it and having fun with it and performing at a high level with ease, transitioning to the next play seamlessly, right? This kind of next play mentality, and shifting the focus more to the process rather than outcome focus. I think heading into a performance, we really want to try to control the controllables, which are all of the aspects of our performance that are in our control, and really kind of check into that person's identity and then what motivates them to leave it all on the floor. I think it's important to remind your athletes that they are capable, right? And that the whole point of practice and routine is so that we can do the routine a number of times, drop the performance in, hopefully have that be similar, and then routine performance.
Okay, so some great insight from Dr. Derek there, and we're really excited to have him kind of supporting this this session. So I think we're going to take a real quick break, just because this is a 2-hour session. So Davis, how much time do you think?
Yeah, we'll give you about 2 minutes. Go to the restroom, go get some water. But also, as you think about this, as you need a break, think about how this is portraying into your kind of athletes too, right? In that kind of mindset, like, even though it's only 2 hours and we always expect our athletes to be performing at the highest level for 2 hours, think about, they might need a break too. Take that time to really reflect on your coaching practices a little bit, as that mental capacity gets kind of worn down, and we just kind of need that mental break. So do some push-ups, jumping jacks, whatever it may be. Take 2 minutes, and we'll meet you right back here for the second half of this clinic. All right, hopefully everybody was able to stretch their legs a bit. We'll kind of wait a little bit longer as people start coming back.
I'm not going to lie, Davis, I started doing a concentration grid. Always trying to beat my old time.
I did some, arm stretches and seat stretches and getting back up and moving around.
It's awesome. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and kick off, the second portion of this 2-hour session. And again, a reoccurring theme throughout this whole presentation is normalizing the conversations around mental health and performance, and normalizing opening up and getting help. And what we really want to try and challenge everyone who's, listening in on this and joining us is to create that sports culture where reaching out for help with anxiety or mental struggle is normal and commonplace. What can you do within your organization or within your coaching program or training program to make it easy for your athletes to open up, whether they're sharing with each other, or they're sharing directly with you as a coach, or they're sharing with a licensed clinician, or someone who is a professional in the mental health field. So that's one challenge we have for everyone, and one thing that we constantly try to think about. I know in the goaltending world, I have a system set up for goaltenders to reach out and get help, and also, help eliminate some of the barriers surrounding, some of the things that they're dealing with, and making it easier and more accessible for them to get help. We also think there's a lot of power in the student run program and initiatives where, they are the powerful vehicle. They are the voices of getting more athletes and more kids their age to make that change and create that culture shift. So it's important to also understand that it's not necessarily the coaches that evolve, this culture of opening up and getting help, but it's actually the athletes. And the athletes have a voice, and they have a really powerful impact on this shift of openness and sharing. And then I think the last piece here is just tying that social purpose into mental wellness will help everyone understand that it's not just about the weakest getting help, but it's also about the strongest that support those that can't support themselves. So we see a lot of these great videos being shared on social media. We see a lot of the movements that are taking place where high-level athletes like your Michael Phelps or your Kevin Loves or Robin Leonard in the hockey world, writing those articles on outlets like the Players Tribune and the Athletic, and sharing their story in the hopes that it does motivate other athletes, maybe that don't have the biggest voice, to still go out and make a change. And then we also think it's really important to make a plan and to really work with experts and others in mental health that do it, as part of their career, to, create a plan that's going to help educate coaches and parents with giving, by giving them those basic strategies and resources and tools that they need to help their athletes. So again, normalizing the conversations by having something that you do on a consistent basis, whether it's once a month or once a week, is a great way to start. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be totally polished. Sometimes the less organized it is, the easier it is for the athletes to open up, because they don't feel that pressure. They don't feel like they're being put under a spotlight and being forced to open up. The more casual
setting, right?
Right. Doesn't have to be a clinical setting. Like Davis said, it can just be a casual conversation with teammates where you're sitting in a virtual chat room or you're in the locker room and you're opening up on a consistent basis. Understanding that it's okay to be struggling. We hear this phrase very often in the sports world when it comes to mental health and performance. It's okay to not be okay. And that's one of the most powerful phrases, because one, it's simple. Two, it's memorable. And three, we're hearing it a lot. And even though it may be a little bit cliche, I think it still helps calm the nerves and the anxiety of athletes that are struggling. And they just understand it's a little bit easier for them to go out and get the help that they need or open up to someone. And we have some other ones here that are pretty basic, but because it's basic, it's powerful because it can be integrated easily. And that is hosting educational sessions, just like the one we're doing here. Thanks to our sponsor at Warehouse Athletes, we have the ability to make this a free session, which is great because that allows more of us to, get involved and make a difference and have that impact. And then again, like we said before, the stronger emphasis on the holistic approach by developing the human first and the athlete second. And there are some other simple steps for coaches available that we have provided in that online toolkit and that we can continue to help you develop beyond this session. So again, Davis and I are here as thought partners. We are not just going to give you this session and then disappear. You can reach out to us at any time if you want to bounce ideas off of us, or if you're looking for, someone who advocates mental health in your area, and you want to integrate that basic mental health curriculum, whether it's into a workbook that you plan for the season, or again, an in-person session, we're here to help you drive that forward. We're here to help you make that happen. And promoting these things at an earlier age through learner-centered skill development is really crucial, because I think we're seeing it especially now. Kids are starting to develop these anxieties and these internal pressures at an earlier and earlier age, because the culture of youth sports is so competitive, especially here in North America. So building that library of resources, having connections with specialists and clinical, licensed clinicians is really important. There's some strategies that we can share too. There's one called activate, detach, and repeat that I actually just learned this past weekend from another mental skills coach in Canada. And so passing along these strategies to you all and then giving you the ability to do the same is, again, how we shift that culture and make a change. And then just the power of opening up and sharing your own struggles and stories. I know Davis has had a huge impact on, a lot of athletes and students that he's worked with, because he's willing to share his story. And again, that's not easy, but if your kids see you doing it, it's going to make it easier for them to do it as well. And there's a lot of power in that.
Well, I think a lot of it too, Justin, is being that creating that collaborative and that open atmosphere. And it's really about the environment that you're willing to push and to challenge your athletes and your colleagues too. It's not necessarily, you don't want to keep this to yourself. You don't want to keep these kind of patterns or these kind of practices to yourself. It's a collaborative work, and we're trying to create a system that is able to build upon itself and to create that culture within the system, and not just your team, that is more open and is more kind of tolerant of some of these ideas, or and able to experience that vulnerability that we don't necessarily always have, right? You're not going to open up the same way to your coach as you do to your parents or your colleagues or your friends, whatever, but your teammates are there to support you. And how can you open up to your teammates, and building that culture and making it, an environment where you're there to support and help each other.
Mm-hmm. And this infographic is similar to the spectrum that we showed you earlier, in the sense that it's a tool that you can use. And this is from the NCAA's amazing online resource for mental health and performance. And again, we just wanted to show you another tool that we'll be sharing in the online toolkit that you can use as kind of a baseline or as a blueprint to integrate into your program and to integrate into, your coaching curriculum, so that you always have something to work from. You have a base to work from that you can fall back on. If you do find that one of your athletes falls somewhere on the scale, it can help you with prevention, treatment, and continuing care for that individual or individuals. And again, I think this one's very self-explanatory as well, so we won't spend too much time on this slide, but just the fact that conversation builds connection. You don't have to be a sports psychologist or, have all of those degrees to help young athletes with their mental health. What you want to do is just be aware, okay, and be sensitive to what that athlete might be dealing with, and know when to help that athlete get help from someone else who has more experience than you. So again, that's why the resources in the toolbox is so important, because you're not expected to do it all on your own. I know there's a lot of coaches, and I struggled with this as a goalie coach for many years. I didn't want to push the wrong buttons. So instead of going out to that athlete and saying, hey, I know you're dealing with something, what can I do to help? I didn't want to say the wrong thing. So I just said nothing at all. And I have a lot of regret with that, because I know kids were looking up to me to help them, or to at least understand that they were struggling. But because I was so worried about saying the wrong thing or pushing the athlete in the wrong direction, I said nothing. And that's the last thing we want to do with our athletes. We want to be at least there to be a voice of reason or voice of calming the athletes that are struggling. And so again, that conversation is going to build that connection and make it easier for the athlete. And if you have those resources in place, then you can take the right steps and push the right buttons and know that that athlete is getting the right type of help. And I think it's also important, this last, kind of bullet point here, mental illness and mental health is not for the 1 in 5. It's on a spectrum. We all deal with it. It's about the 5 in 5. So always feel like, have that confidence to be able to, speak on these topics, know your limits, and, respect the feelings of the athlete as well. I think that's also really important. And then the component of a follow-up plan, which Davis, I think, explained extremely well earlier in this session. Identify what's needed for that follow-up care, have the resources in place, and don't just forget about it when a kid tells you that he's struggling and he's seeing someone else. Continue to, show some empathy and show some compassion for that athlete, and make sure that you're there for them beyond the scope of the help that they're already getting with that mental health professional. And understand too that advocacy really matters. We talked about this before in terms of supporting the younger age group. We really like this infographic because this is kind of a more of a 10,000 foot view of how an organization can support young athletes and young individuals that might be struggling with mental health right now. So again, in the toolkit, you'll see this infographic, and it's 5 really solid steps to help you shift that culture towards a more open and understanding one.
Yeah, so now we're going to kind of challenge you in some breakout rooms that really focus on building your own toolkit. I'm going to share a link in the chat that shows, you're able to kind of edit and put in your ideas. So please feel free to copy and paste these articles that you find, but it's going to be a quick scavenger hunt. You're going to try to find mobile apps, a case study, printable exercise, YouTube videos, any articles written by athletes, and really try to find the most resources and build that toolkit. If you need to add lines into your, in the Google spreadsheet, just right click and it should be up there. So please feel free in your breakout rooms. Everybody's going to have the same access to the same document. So when I break you out into breakout rooms, just be aware of which breakout room you're in. It'll kind of say and kind of give you a preface when I kind of split you guys up, but just be aware that you guys are working together to find resources, and you can kind of divvy it up and say, I'll look for some mobile apps, or however you want to do it, but just try to get as many resources on that toolkit as possible. And we'll kind of keep it update with time, but also see where you're at. And this is kind of a resource book that you can take with you beyond just from today.
Yep.
So Justin, we'll start the clock and we'll get into breakout rooms.
Okay, welcome back in. I think everyone's back. And we thought this would be a cool exercise just because we want to, again, reinforce the importance of building that library of resources. And there's a lot of great stuff out there online. Tons of stuff. It's great to see more and more every day. I feel like 6 or 7 years ago, when I was earlier in my coaching career, it was really tough to find, online programs and movements and YouTube videos related to mental health. And now there's a whole cornucopia of resources out there. That's what we wanted to stress with this exercise, is that it is kind of easy to build that library, whether you're leaning on mobile apps or scientific research or, different workbook exercises. There's so many great tools out there to help you build that mental health and mental performance toolkit for your athletes.
And I think even you can have your athletes do this. What do they use? Something that you can bring them into the conversation too, and not just necessarily you catering and proctoring these things as well, is what are they using? What is something that helps them? And be able to have those discussions about it. There's definitely resources and tools out there that, even within 5 minutes, you guys were just crushing it, right? You guys were copy and pasting. You decided, I'm going to go look for this, and then just start adding things. And it makes it so it's not like, oh, tell me about your experience here, but it really allows those conversations to really fall into place afterwards, right? You say, this is a great resource. Why do you think that's a great resource? And so I think, that's a great segue, because, we talk about resources as only articles or only, tangible, books or pieces that we research on, but we have to leverage experts or our connections elsewhere too. And, sometimes it's not, necessarily books and just articles or whatever to experience somebody else. We can bring in experts. And then that's kind of what we did today, is we're bringing you Trisha Terns, who, I've known for more than 20 years, and she's opened 6 gyms through the Midwest and Northeast. And she's, from my alma mater. So we've grown really close over the last, decades. So I can't really tell how old I am anymore, but at the same time, we have to leverage the experts that we know, and we have to leverage the experts that, maybe within our communities that we already kind of have experience with. So I'm going to give the kind of controls over to her. She's going to kind of walk you through some steps, but, she's a certified high performance coach, and I'll let her kind of explain, some of her background, but also kind of what she's going to be doing with you guys today.
All right. What's up, everybody? Nice to see everyone. First of all, Davis, Justin, thank you so much for having me today. Super excited to be here. I've only recently have been exposed to MindSpark Learning, but it's such a valuable resource for you guys. I hope you continue to work with these guys and just leveling up your own development, because the only way that we can really coach and lead with excellence is by developing ourselves first, because we are, like they talked about earlier, the role models that are leading the way. So, I mean, a little bit about myself. I don't want to talk too much about that because I really want to be able to serve you guys the best today. So bringing in some of my expertise, when they asked me to come on today, trying to figure out, I could spend literally days of clinics going through this stuff. I'm super excited about this stuff. So I'll do my best to keep on track. So if you feel like I'm looking at notes, it's because I will talk about this stuff all day if you let me. So I'm a certified high performance coach through Brendan Burchard. He is a huge influencer in the development and education space. He's also a writer and an author first and foremost. He's written High Performance Habits, things like that. And so what the high performance framework is a scientifically proven process to developing higher performance. And the definition that we talk about in terms of high performance is not necessarily this success, right? Because success is different to every single individual, coach, athlete, anyone. But really it means succeeding beyond standard norms over the long term. So not just having a really good playing year, but having consistency across the long term, above the higher, being of higher standard, right? So succeeding beyond standard norms consistently while maintaining two things, and that is positive relationships, right? Being able to maintain positive relationships while still being victorious in what you are after, and also maintaining wellness, right? Your positive wellness space, not just your physical health, but also your mental health, which is why we're here today, right? And I also come from a background of neurolinguistic programming and timeline therapy. And we could do a whole clinic on this. So maybe in the future, that's something we could do, but I'm going to talk about rapport specifically because NLP is very much about rapport. If any of you are familiar with that, you can do tons of research on that if you're more interested, or you can certainly contact me at any of the information below. I wrote a book during quarantine, so that was fun. Just when Davis talks about, putting yourself around other people, right? It's like, how do you get people together? And the only reason that I could write a book within quarantine was because I pulled in 14 of us, actually 14 co-authors to write this book. And so we did it in less than 100 days. So when you put your minds with other people, all of a sudden you pull in information, you pull in skills, you pull in strengths of other people to be able to develop something very fast. And that's what you're doing on a team, right? Is you're pulling in these strengths and really like boosting these strengths of the individual and pulling them in as a team to really fill those gaps with each person, right? And to be able to make the most successful, highest performing team. And then really what I do is I teach people how to master their minds so they can take their leadership, right, to the next level, also take their service to their communities and to the world and to their families to the next level, and their passion too. That's obviously very important. I know all of you on this call are super passionate about what you do. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Justin. All right, so just broad overview before I dive into this is leadership from this standpoint is so important. And there's a lot of people that will kind of stand down when it comes to leadership. They might think that they're not a leader. They might think that they're not of influence, but we all are, obviously. People are watching us all the time. And so with leadership and advancing you, my goal today is to help you see what your next level of leadership is going to be. Because you have a lot of power, you have a lot of capability, and leadership is just like a muscle. Influence is just like a muscle. It takes development. It is a skill that must be developed, and there's no cap to high performance in that. So I'm not just looking at performance as the ability to play really well in lacrosse or hockey or whatever, right? Your leadership is performance. You are performing every time you're in a leadership and or a role model place. Would you agree? If you have questions as I go here, certainly write them in the chat. I want to make sure this is directed towards you today and that you're getting the most out of it. So if you have questions and you want me to expand on anything, please do so in the chat and the guys will let me know. All right, next slide. So influence and communication, there's 3 elements to establishing great rapport, all right? And rapport is one of those things that people think that rapport is like liking someone, but it's not about liking someone. Like rapport is literally a process of responsiveness. So it's your ability to respond to athletes or to your staff or to your other coaches, colleagues, whatever, in a way that's going to build that agreement between the two of you. And 93% of our communication is unconscious. All right. And so we have to remember that piece because it's not always the words that you're voluntarily saying, It's also your posture. It's the way you're hand gesturing. It's things that you don't even think about that you're doing, that you are doing. And when you can not only know this about yourself, but also read it from other people, you can immediately establish rapport with people to the point that you're able to get on their level much easier. So when it comes to exposing certain mental things that are happening, mental health issues that you're concerned about, it just allows you to do that with ease, right? With that other person. It doesn't bring up any reaction. It doesn't feel like an attack. It doesn't, right? There's all these things that it could go this way and it could go this way. But if you've developed really excellent rapport, one-on-one with the people you're working with, you have a really high ability to work with that person on a different level, not just in sport. Okay. So communication, 7% of it is words, 38% tonality, 55% physiology. So let's go into some of those a little bit. You can go ahead to the next slide, Justin. All right, words are the least of the communication, right? 7%. But words are predicates, right? They're words or phrases that you're using. And when we go into mirroring and matching, if any of you have ever done sales training, you know what this is. This is not something for just salesmen. It is, you are selling at the end of the day. You are serving the people that you work with, and that requires persuasion and other things. So using other people's words that they use helps you to gain better rapport. All right, keywords, whatever that means, common experiences and associations, go right back to Davis's story. Like, how many of you felt his story while he was talking about it earlier, right? You immediately are like drawn into that because you have a human experience that you can mirror, that you can experience and at least feel from an emotional standpoint. All right, you can go to the next one, Justin. Tonality, this is such a big one. And, you know, over the years, as I've learned this, I realized so much what it means to manage your state and manage your tone. In any conversation and any conversation of persuasion or influence, your tonality really matters. And that goes into these 4 things on the side here. So your tone, which is your pitch, your tempo, which is the speed or the pace at which you're speaking. You can tell when I get excited about this stuff, I start to talk really fast, right? So I have to literally consciously tell myself, hey, slow it down for a second so these people can actually absorb what I'm saying. Your timbre, which is the quality of your voice, like being able to enunciate very well. The volume, how loud you are and how soft you want to talk to pull people in. Right, so when you're like, I remember being at the gyms, I started a gym back in 2013. It was a CrossFit gym. We turned it into our own brand. It's called Strong Together Fitness. We have 6 locations. But going through so many years of being in the fitness and wellness space and being a coach in front of a group, like using your volume is incredible. Like once you learn how to do it really well, it really makes a difference. So I remember, you know, I was coaching adults. So I have, you know, 15 adults in front of me and they're chatty Cathys, right? I would use like kindergarten things like focus fox, like guys, bring it up, bring out the focus fox, like bring it in. But I would also use my volume of my voice. So I would start talking really quietly. All right, this is the workout today. We're gonna do 3 rounds of this, right? And all of a sudden they have to like put their ear in to hear me. So their attention is immediately brought in. So when you're having a conversation, let's bring it back to like the mental health part, your tonality and having a conversation with them in that regard is going to be different than when you're on the sidelines with them, walking them through something that they need to do on the field, right? It's completely different. When you're showing that you care about getting them help, your tone is going to be much different. And when you go into it intentionally, it really creates that care for your client or the person that you're working with. That's incredibly important. I think you can all resonate with this picture. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. Like how many of you have been caught off guard by the way someone has spoken to you? We just need to keep that in mind as we talk about leadership. All right, next slide. Physiology. So you guys all know this dude, the crocodile dude. So his facial expressions are just insane, and I love them. You can never tell really what he's thinking. Like, he could be thinking a million things right now, and I'd love if you put in the chat like what really you think he's doing right there, and I guarantee you many of you will say 20 different things. Like, we don't really know what's going on, but we can use our physiology to communicate what we need to communicate. So your posture, the way you stand, the way you gesture, if you're gesturing with passion versus when you're not gesturing with passion. Are you just kind of like a person that keeps their hands to themselves and keeps them behind their back and doesn't gesture at all? And what would it mean if you started to gesture more with passion? What would that mean for your athletes to recognize that? Or maybe reflect on when you do actually gesture with passion, what are you doing? Your facial expressions, obviously, and your breathing patterns too. You can tell when someone is stressed out, right? You can tell when someone is completely exhausted in the way that they're breathing. You can tell when someone has control of their breathing and when they don't. And that's something to pay attention to, is with curiosity about your athletes, is what really is going on with them when you sense something about their breathing pattern, or you sense something about a facial expression, or you see that someone's posture is usually pretty confident and upright when they walk in the door, and that's their normal, but for some reason today they walked in and they just didn't look the same. All right, that's a mental note. It's like, okay, I noticed that. I noticed what's going on there. Go ahead to the next slide. All right, this piece I wanted to bring in from NLP because it's really important to think about and to know for yourself how you learn so that you can really get across things to other people, because everybody learns in a different way. My mom and I were having a conversation yesterday about, I mean, I'm a bird nerd. I'm 100% a bird nerd. I love birds. And I identify and ID birds based on sound. And I'm very, very high on my auditory scale. Like, I listen to things, I need to hear things. I can't just read them. Like, I always thought I was this terrible reader. And it's not that I'm a terrible reader, it's just that I learn by hearing differently than other people. So some people can visually look and read and absorb everything. I couldn't comprehend crap in college. Like, I would reread things and reread things and reread things. So we have to be conscious, because in order to influence at a new level and lead with excellence and with greater excellence, wouldn't you agree that this is something we would have to consider when we work with an individual, right? And especially when it comes to conversing and getting on their level in the mental health world and making sure that we're supporting them, giving them resources in that way. So auditory is here, visual is obviously see, kinesthetic is touch, feel it out, right? So you know that athlete that needs to have you show them the air squat, and that athlete that needs to do it themselves and feel it out for them to understand it, right? So start to pay attention to what your athletes, how they really learn, like what do they need to do in order to absorb some of that. The ones on the left-hand side, if you're saying it, so the auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, those are the biggest ones, right? Those are the ones that the main ones, everybody has a little bit of each one. The kinesthetic is the touch or the feeling it out, right? They have to touch something and feel it in order to get it. They have to be walked through this new app that you're giving them as a resource for mental health. They need to be walked through it in order for them to get it quicker, versus you just giving it to them and having them do it on their own. And then the other ones on the side are the least, but they still exist: the olfactory, gustatory, and auditory digital. So the auditory digital is actually very popular. A lot of people have a piece of that, which if any of you talk to yourself, either out loud or in your head, a lot, that is that. All right, any questions there? Let me know. Yes, coach every person equally, just don't coach everyone the same way. Correct, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. So matching and mirroring. This is so powerful when you do it, because in order for someone to get into rapport with you and for them to feel more comfortable around you, matching and mirroring is something that you can do consciously that they're never going to notice, right? They're never going to understand that. So think about when you go to shake someone's hand, what kind of handshake really turns you off, and which one is usually like, okay, yeah, I get that guy. right? So what I'm going to ask you to do is something that you probably would never think to do. I want you to remove all biases about what a strong handshake is, and adapt as a leader to that person so that you can build greater rapport with them. So if someone comes into you and they give you the little, like, barely a touch, right? Like barely a handshake. Your response, if you are trying to gain greater rapport, is to match or mirror that. So it's actually, if you're a strong handshake kind of guy and you just go in with that, it can actually turn someone off. So think about that when you're matching and mirroring people, about how really are they, how do I build rapport with this person to be a better leader, to influence them in a better way, to be able to speak with them on their level, and to be able to actually build change in them and get them to advance in their sport faster. Because going in not paying attention to that is not leading with excellence. And sometimes we have to, like, get rid of our own, like, assumptions about things before we go into that. So you can see, like, Barack Obama is the frickin' man when it comes to this. If you go and research matching and mirroring, you will see so many pictures of him doing this, because he's doing it very consciously. He's very much aware of NLP. He's very much aware with how he builds rapport with people. So even though he doesn't have two hands on, he's not mimicking them, but he's actually just matching him by holding his jacket over his side. Right? So he's not doing it completely like being a weirdo, but he's doing something that other person is doing to match and mirror him. And that's building rapport in the moment. So definitely, with using the 3 elements of great rapport that we talked about earlier, using that to communicate on their level is really important. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to go into a little bit of influence from the high performance framework. And before I do, though, I just want to explain to you that this is not just some Joe Schmo thing that's been produced. Like, this comes from scientific research from the High Performance Institute across thousands and thousands of people. So it started with 100 proven performance variables. Like, performance has been studied for a long time, as you all know, and I'm sure you've all studied pieces of this already. But what the High Performance Institute did was they researched global surveys, structured interviews, data analytics, academic literature reviews, coaching insights from thousands of high performance coaching sessions. So they had empirical results from all of this training. And they went in there asking a lot of questions about what really develops and makes someone high performing as opposed to mediocre. And so what they came out with, without going into too much of the scientific details of what it means to scientifically research an education-based program like this, they found that there are 5 to 6 habits that high performance people, like the Oprahs of the world, Oprah has actually gone through this exact same high performance curriculum that I take my clients through. So Brendan Burchard has coached Oprah. He's coached 2 presidents. He's coached high performance or high performing, like, Olympic athletes. He's coached a lot of people in this curriculum, but the curriculum is developed in a way that is proven by the High Performance Institute. So these habits are specific things that people are doing consciously that make them high performing. And so influence and developing influence is, there's habits around that people are doing. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some of that framework today. You can go ahead to the next slide, Justin. So I want you to go into the chat and just tell me what influence means to you, because without us being on the same page of what influence means, it's not as, it just will go a lot better if I can see what you think influence is defined as. Like, how would you define it yourself? And I really love this, like, social learning environment is so good. Justin and Davis have done such a good job at bringing that in. Okay, so in context, Justin says enhancing an athlete's understanding and awareness of their sport and the world around them. Sure. Inspiring me to think differently. Yes, boom. We'll talk about that one later. Relatable and joining with others. Motivating. Something that makes you do something or follow them, copy the way you do things. Yes. Okay. effect you have on others and the effect they have on you. Yes. Understanding individuals' worldview. Okay. So all really, really good things. I super appreciate you guys putting that in there. Positively mentor someone to grow positively. Okay, so growth is a huge thing, and obviously that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get people to grow into being more vulnerable, into opening up to things that are going on internally in this internal dialogue that they have, and that whatever things are going on at home and whatever effects COVID have had on them, it's a big thing because you're now dealing with a different athlete. It's not the same athlete. I mean, I work with a lot of business owners, and so it's always this conversation of what is the new client that you're talking to now? Because the copy that you put out in marketing, the way that you speak to people over the phone is definitely developed differently. For me, I've been back in the leadership headquarters role. Like I have my high performance business coaching practice here. But I also am a leader and in the headquarters of Strong Together, and I've been coaching high performance to all of our owners and coaches for the last 3 months, because you can train movement all day long, but if you cannot coach someone through some of these life experiences, through worry, through frustration, through resistance, through all of these things that they're feeling through COVID, then you're going to lose that person. You're going to lose that client. And that does not serve them in terms of that integrity. Like, we need to be able to make sure that they continue their health journey despite what's happening around them, despite what's out of control. So, so that's an important thing. You can go ahead to the next slide, Justin. I want you to think real quick about a time where you felt incredibly influential and what was happening at that time. And that's not a question on here, but it's just, I'm just throwing it out there. Because you guys are all obviously people of influence. You wouldn't be in the position that you are. And I give you so many kudos and acknowledge that, because there's not many people that will step up. Many people think that you have to be a natural born leader in order to lead. And that's just not the truth. Like, you guys are all leaders in this room, and we really have to take ownership of that. And does it come with a lot of responsibility? Sure, it sure does. But it's a responsibility that a lot of people aren't taking. And I really value that about all the people on this call, and encourage you to take it even to the next level, take it into another gear, and what that could look like. So the power of reflection is really critical, which is what we're going to kind of do right now. So thinking about that most influential time for you, I also want you to describe who has been the most influential person in your life. Like, who was that? If you were to describe them, like what about them was so influential? What about them made them? Like, pick one person that you resonated with the most. So I'll give you an example. I did this with my Strong Together team a couple of weeks ago. And we have quite a few college athletes that are now CrossFit, or not CrossFit, but Strong Together gym owners and athletes. And Christine came up with that. She said that one of her volleyball coaches in college was probably the most influential person to her. And she described this, she was always like teaching her how to think. And that is definitely one of the biggest pieces of influences, is people teach us how to think. So she said that there used to be this thing that she would do. She did this one day and it just stuck with her forever. It literally got lodged in her brain, and she literally brought it up in this call. Her coach went out and she had a bag of M&Ms and she had a bag of gummy bears, and she put them all out on the floor, and she went around and she stomped on the M&Ms. She stomped on the M&Ms and she stomped on the gummy bears. And she was like, which one do you want to be? Right? The M&Ms crumble into a bunch of little pieces, right? The gummy bears like bounce back into their normal form, right? And so she was talking about resilience, but she was showing it in a completely different way. It was visual, it was kinesthetic, it was auditory, right? And so everyone looked at that and took something different from it. But for Christine, it lodged in her brain forever. And that's something that you have the opportunity to do in terms of influence. And that's a crazy, awesome responsibility to have. It's like, how can you show better, and how can you lead with greater excellence and lead with greater influence so that your athletes resonate with that? So we're going to go into a little, what's it called? A Mentimeter. I love this. And Justin, go ahead and tell them the question that you want them to answer.
Yeah, so similar to the last one, Davis shared the link in the chat room. You should be able to just refresh the page if you still have it open, and we'll share the answers here in a second, but you should be able to type in the main characteristics of your favorite coach, past or present. So keeping in mind what Trisha's been, sharing with us, think back to, the most influential coach or your favorite coach that you had growing up. Or maybe it's not a coach that you actually had. Maybe it's someone like, I'm watching The Last Dance right now, and the Bulls coach, he's amazing, and you hear about him, and then you kind of get to see inside how he really managed these athletes with these high profiles, Dennis Rodman, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. And I think it's, that's had an influence on me just, the past week I've been watching this show. So I'll go ahead and share the results. And this is called a word bubble. So, a word cloud. And the terms that are entered multiple times will be bigger. And the words that might only be used, maybe once or twice, or will be smaller. So as you guys start to type in your answers, you'll see the word cloud grow.
I love that consistency. Consistency in some of these things like nurturing, consistency and focus, consistency in your calm and the way you present yourself, because people are mimicking what you like. They're going to be a reflection of you. So if you come at it with frustration or a lack of preparedness, or like everybody else is going to sense that. So just kind of think about that mirroring aspect of like what you put out there is also what you're going to get back from your athletes. And how are you doing it at your best? Allowing for questions, that's a great one. Empathy, encouragement, observant, patient.
What's really cool is that you don't see one term that much bigger than the others. So there's a big diversity in the answers. There's a few. So now knowledgeable and approachable.
Approachable. Boom. Building rapport, baby. It's so important. Once we've talked about this today from a neurological standpoint, stuff's going to start showing up for you guys all over the place. So really pay attention and start to just jot things down, because I want to make sure that today you walk away with some action items that are actually going to advance your influence over your team, that are actually going to influence you in terms of your leadership and get you to lead at a higher level. So going back to these things that are up here in front of us right now, like what ones do you need to improve on, and which ones are you already really good at? Because in high performance, like when I work one-on-one with a client, my job isn't just to get them to bring up their weaknesses, right? It's to get them to advance their strengths. So if someone is a 10 out of 10 with, let's say, their energy, and they think that their energy is really good, it's my job to challenge them and say, well, what would an 11 out of 10 look like? What would a 12 out of 10 look like? So if you rate yourself in some of these, really see what you would have to do this week. Like this week, one thing that you would actually do, so one thing that you would put in your calendar to do that would actually take you to the next level. Like maybe it is being more approachable to a specific athlete. Maybe it is being more consistent with not just treating one athlete this way, but treating everybody that way. Or maybe it is showing compassion a little bit differently in terms of the way we talked about earlier, in terms of the way you manage your tone during a conversation or manage your tone during a practice. So some things to consider there. I would love if you put in the comment or the chat, and this goes right to this question, where do you wish you had even more influence? So put in the chat here if you feel open and vulnerable to doing that, which I hope you do, because sharing is caring. Like literally, like we've talked about earlier, the only way that we're going to grow is by recruiting other people that are in a similar boat, and knowledgeable and expressive, to be able to learn how they're doing it, what they need to work on, and to be able to reflect on that ourselves. So what do you want to work on this week? What can you do? Like literally do, because we could talk about this stuff all day, but if you're not going to take action on it, then it's a moot point, right? Okay. You can go ahead to the next slide, Justin. Thank you. So the influence model, yeah, keep rolling in those, and we'll check those chats out as we go here. Be more open to having discussions. Yes, beautiful. In what sense, Carol? Like in what way? Is it during a particular instance? Is it during particular conversations around a particular topic? Like think very specifically where you would have to improve that. I love that. All right, so the influence model. This is actually the worksheet that you're gonna have. I sent Davis to put into your toolkit this influence model worksheet. And there's three ways, three common things that the most influential people in the world have. And somebody said it earlier in the way that they defined influence, and that was, the first one is they teach us how to think. So look at like the Martin Luther Kings of the world, Mother Teresa. Like one thing that they really did was teach us how to think. But how did they do that, right? What things did they really do that made us think a certain way? Like, how did they do it? How did they talk? How did they show themselves? What did they show up like when they were speaking? Like, all of that has an impact on us, and then changing the way that we think and getting us to think in a certain way. So I love mental mastery. Like that is like, I love the brain. I love learning about it. I love digging in. I love challenging myself in it. And when you have an athlete on the field that screws up, right? They have an error somewhere, and what goes through their psyche, there's multiple things that they could go through. What it's our job to do is to really know what they're thinking and be able to be curious and vulnerable and ask them what they're thinking. Not just ask them, but sense what they're like. What's going on in their head? Is it something that's going to move them forward, or is it something that's going to force them to stand in their own way? Because a lot of times that's happening. Thought is very powerful, right? What you think becomes the way you behave, becomes your reality, period. So going back to thought and really understanding better one-on-one from the individuals that we work with, how they think. The second thing is that they challenge us, right? We all know what a good challenge feels like. And nothing is really going to mobilize us or get our attention better than like a good challenge. And so the way that you present challenges can be really beneficial for the athletes, or it could not be very beneficial for the athletes. So we have to know how to challenge them and how to challenge the right things. Some challenges can be done as a group, right? With that group camaraderie. Some challenges need to be done individually. And how are you doing that? Are you having side conversations with those people? Are you doing it as a group? Are you pulling in 2 people at a time? Like, what does that look like for you in terms of challenging people? Because when you do challenge them, it causes you to stretch them, right? They're not just thinking in their own little bubble anymore. You're trying to stretch their brain to think bigger and not think so small. And so when you bring up things like mental health, right? And they've had no one else in their entire life has brought up this to you, has actually approached them about it. You've now changed your relationship, right? And that's really powerful for someone. And you're the mentor that they're going to think about for the rest of their lives. And that's like so amazing to me. I love that butterfly effect, right? Of you doing one thing that doesn't necessarily seem comfortable to you because you're a leader, and you understand and you like discomfort, you like going into outside of your comfort zone, you step into something like that just to see where it goes, and it ends up changing someone's life. Like that is incredibly powerful. I mean, even in the video they showed you, they told all of those athletes talked about things that they had been thinking for years and years and years. And that's why I love what I do, is because my one-on-one clients tell me things that they have never told their spouse before. and we get really deep in order to build change, because there's deep work that happens internally that this curriculum gets to touch on. And so I hope you guys feel some of that today. I hope you get a sense of that. I hope you hear that. As a coach, you must always assume that you are always coaching, even if you weren't trying. Yes. We call it WOD skers. It's workout of the day WOD in our gyms, right? We have this event we call WOD skers. It's the Oscars. It's our version of the Oscars. So every year we have a black tie event. We rent out a golf club and we go, and it's catered, and we give out like the Sir Sweats a Lot award and like all these crazy awards. So fun. But we have the highest award, which is the Odin Award. And Odin is my pit bull dog. And I used to take him to the gyms when I owned and operated the gyms every day. And so everyone knows Odin, but that is the effect of someone is always watching you. So Odin always has his eyes on you. He knows if you're not hitting that target. He knows if you're not counting your reps properly. He knows the people that are holding integrity, right? Even when they're not, even when they think nobody else is watching. And so it's that idea that we are going to role model when we know people are watching us. We will show up as our best selves when we know someone else is watching us. So thanks for adding that, Tim. That's great. All right, so back to this. So number 3, and this is through the pandemic, this has been my absolute, the biggest thing that I've pushed and pushed and pushed. That's what I'm paid to do, is I'm paid to push, is to show up leading by example. You cannot expect anything out of anybody else if you cannot show up as your best self. So in the morning, the best practical thing that you can do is to not just write down all the to-do list of the things that you need to do, but next to those to-do lists and those action items and those meetings, it's writing down who you want to be. How do you want to show up? Because it's not going to be the same day. It's not going to be the same with everyone. It's not going to be the same in each thing, and it's not going to be the same every day. So really role modeling who you want to be and who you want your athletes to be is so necessary to advancing your influence over them. All right. So that means you being vulnerable. You can go to the next slide, Justin. And I know we took you a little bit over today, guys, so I apologize, but this is my last slide, and I'll give it back to Davis and Justin. I super appreciate you guys having me on today, but I just want to leave you with these 2 words, because the vulnerability and the curiosity are something that I have been literally thinking on and acting on so much in my life. And as soon as I did it, things started to change. So when you open up about things, when you open up about stories, when you tell people things that you have never told people before, you have this weight off your shoulders, and people respond to emotion. And so when you can show emotion through vulnerability, right, and you can show that you're showing it even though you're uncomfortable, people are going to receive that very well. And it really changes the game in terms of you showing up, because if you want them to be vulnerable and opening up to you, you also have to do the same to them. It's this reciprocal effect. All right. And then the last thing here is the curiosity. Like, the only way that you can show greater influence and leadership and really make mental health this big component, like that 90-10 percentage that they went through earlier, that is such a crazy statistic. And it's so true though, because we talk about how everything is mental, but we only focus on it 10% of the time. So when you focus on and you're curious about the athlete, you're asking questions, you're digging more, that's going to pull out a lot of things, right? It's going to build greater rapport when you talk about things that are outside of the norm. And it's going to really show you what's really going on under that mask, right? It's going to open up that stuff for you. So I hope that serves you guys today. I really appreciate everybody being on today. It just says a whole lot about this whole program and just you as a coach, right? So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Trisha. We'll send and forward her email and her website with the toolkit, as well as the worksheet that she's kind of mentioning before. So please take those resources that she's given and the conversations that she's brought up and really take them to the next step and kind of focus it on yourself and also your athletes. So when we're kind of looking back at, making that connection, right? This is a quote by the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, which is scary that they have to put a quote out about this type of situation, but at the same time, it's very powerful and meaningful. And understanding, how mental health does have to do with everything with your performance, right? It could lead to fatigue, it could lead to depression, it could lead to your relationships, it could lead to academic performance and your physical performance and your health. And so how does that really just play along? I mean, that is the base of this whole conversation, right? We have to focus on our mental health in order to mentally perform and mentally prepare ourselves. And that's really the bridge between everything. And if we're not focused on our mental health, we're not going to be performing at our highest level. And so we really need to take a step back. Even though it's a physical piece that we're trying to perform, the mental piece is still that 90%. And we really need to kind of readdress that on a consistent basis. So Justin, if you want to go to the next slide, we're going to kind of skip this next video. We'll attach it in the toolkit so you guys get a chance to watch it. But it does focus a little bit more on Derek's kind of philosophies, but really just making those same connections that we're kind of talking about. Is just for an example, if you're not there and you're driving with depression and anxiety, your sleep might be thrown off, right? And how does that really affect your performance? Obviously, it's going to, negatively affect your, performance if you're tired and fatigued and you don't have the endurance to last the next shift or the change or whatever. But also, it's going to lead you to have these negative thoughts, right? You're going to get down into that spiraling idea of, what if I could have done this, or what if, and that's not always the healthiest case. And that's where we need to have those conversations. Why aren't you sleeping, right? What's going on at home, or what can we do to improve that? And as a coach, it's not necessarily saying you need to step up and get mad and say you need to push them even harder because they're not trying. There's definitely some reason, right? There's some reason for that change. And that goes with nutrition, right? So some people may break a diet, and that goes with, why did you break that diet? What caused you to take a step away from, eating this type of food or eating clean to then going out and grabbing, McDonald's for 5 days in a row, right? So I think you need to make sure that we're having those conversations and so on. And even if it is just some small change, like they may not have the best or healthiest diet originally, but what could we converse about to make them change that or improve that? And sometimes financial barriers are a thing, and accessibility is a thing. And there are food deserts in a lot of different areas around the country. We just have to be aware of how to address that in a proper way and contextualize it for that athlete, right? And I think Tim mentioned this earlier, is you want to treat every athlete equally, not the same. And so we just have to make sure we're understanding each and every athlete as themselves as an individual before we do it as a team. Justin, go to the next slide.
Yep. So we are going to be sharing a lot of tools and resources in the online toolkit. It's very robust, just to help serve you all better and to give you, again, more of that blueprint to work from. So we're not going to go through these right now just because we're already a few minutes over time, but you will see them in the online toolkit. Naleli, yes, you will get a recording of the session. So if you want to go back and look at some of Trisha's great insights or some of the things that we discussed earlier, some of the strategies, you absolutely will have that opportunity. And yeah, I thought this was an awesome session. Again, same thing with this video. It's another resource. It's a few minutes, but we'll go ahead and save that for the online toolkit just so we can wrap up. The same thing with the NCAA resource. It's wonderful what the NCAA has provided for all of the universities, the athletes, the student athletes as well. So there's a lot of great resources that we'll be sharing for you in that toolkit, as well as some of the mobile apps. And maybe you've already found these mobile apps on our little, virtual treasure hunt. So same sort of thing. You'll see all of that in the online toolkit. And we also just wanted to share the idea where you can work with your athletes to design a mobile app. It can be a great exercise to have them, think about the things that they need in order to, open up or feel better or feel connected or share, again, some of the symptoms that they might be dealing with. So just another idea that, again, we will share in the online toolkit. So last piece here, Davis, do you want to explain the survey?
Yep. So if you guys wouldn't mind, if you would like a certificate for your completion, I know sometimes educators need them as well. But what I would ask of you is please fill out the survey. I've attached the link there. There's 2 pages, and it helps us send out that certificate for you. By all means, we'll send this as well in the toolkit. So if you can't fill it out right now, please take the time to do it afterwards. It just helps us improve as well as kind of cater to the needs that you guys are providing us with. So if you guys have some sort of topics or things that you wish we would have covered, please put those comments in there, and we're happy to kind of adjust our future plans to say, hey, this is what we're offering next. So we are very customizable. We will come, work with you on an individual basis, but we are continuing to put out our clinics and our kind of specializations and bringing experts in and connecting you guys as well. So kind of to go along with those same lines, in our mental performance series is our next one is August 5th. So please join us for that. That's including VR, and we'll have neurotrainer on board, and they'll be kind of guest speaking on their behalf, as well as just talking about VR in general. August 20th and August 25th, we have a team building retreat to kind of bridge the gap between team building and this new normal, as well as the growth of high school esports at the end of August. So please join us. We're thrilled that you guys came, and we hope to see you guys again here soon. So thank you.